Oh, it's happy belated Canada Day. So this is what I was thinking about yesterday when Canada was rolling on, and all the stuff that I've been sort of thinking about and researching lately for myself as to how to really view Canada Day as well as Independence Day in the United States, perhaps even, and some of the correlations that you can draw between all of this stuff and where it really originates, too. I was going to talk about that. So this gets into um, some of the esoteric or occult things that go on in the world, and probably always have to some degree. But at any rate, like everything is sort of based on ancient religions. So we're celebrating Canada Day, and that's as a political holiday for an independent country, supposedly, right? But at the core of all that, before that could happen, there had to be a religion before it. And what the religions have done traditionally in the past is appointed kings, because all religions studied the stars. This was the first religion, was the study of the sky, the sun, the moon, and the stars. The seasons obviously become the pattern that they started to realize, and then you could start being able to calculate things like blood moons and maybe other celestial events as well once you start to learn the patterns and see them lining up. And then, to me, that's always been used to control people. You can make claims about something happening on a certain day based on a celestial event, and when the celestial event comes, everyone goes, "Woo, ah," and they fall for it, hook, line, and sinker. That's how I look at it, anyway. But so that's ancient, and then it comes all the way through to today, because I would suggest that Rome is the biggest benefactor of that system right now. Like the sun god was perpetuated through Egypt and maybe then on to Rome thereafter. It's hard to say for sure who really taught it to who, but Babylon would have had it as well, with Nimrod, I believe, being a sun god as well. And so that's a lot of what it has to do with. It's all to do with the stars, and then it turns into kings and nations. And these days, now we have politics and countries as just the new version of all of this stuff uh, that's already been happening, just under different names and systems. And it has evolved. I mean, I kind of bitch about this stuff, but at the same time, it's not that bad living here. I mean, they've given us, well, I shouldn't say they've given us, but things that have been contained within the societies that have existed, say, since, agricultural, non-nomadic civilization started, is things like aqueducts and clean water. And, I mean, there's a quality of living that we have that we never had before. So, I mean, a guy can complain about the secret stuff that goes on and the wars and the lies and all the other stuff. And maybe, even this generation treating us like cattle more than maybe the previous generations were. Um, yeah, that's probably debatable, actually. But at any rate, that's like ultimately what Canada is. As I say, the Romans carried on this ancient religion and still do to this day. Like, you wouldn't think that, but I regret to tell you, I don't think that Jesus was born on December 25th. But that coincides with the Saturnalian uh, celebration, as well as, it's the winter solstice. So it's the birth of the sun. The sun is at its lowest point, and it's going to start getting longer on that day. So there's the mystery religion and behind it again. And they make us all worship it one way or another. You're going to worship it. And a lot of that ends up being commerce these days, too, right? Christmas, and you go spend a bunch of money, whether you're religious or not, you're going to celebrate it and buy fancy food and liquor and whatever other good things you like for the holidays, right? So that's where we are with that. And then you can get to the spring equinox, and that's told as the crucifixion of Jesus on that day. But it changes every year, so obviously that can't be held as a tradition of the actual day, but used as the event. And it's also, midpoint coming into summer. So now we're in high summer right now, right? June 21st past the, what is that, 2 weeks ago now? Something like that. Not quite. 2 weeks ago. And the renaming of Quintilis, which was the 5th month, but now it's the 7th month because of the rearrangement of the calendars, July, which is named for Julius Caesar. That's where we are now at high summer, high sun worship time when the sun is at its strongest and most powerful, really, right? And Julius Caesar, the Emperor of Rome. And so that's where we are right now, experiencing Canada Day. And in 2 more days from now, we're going to be experiencing, or the Americans will be experiencing, their Independence Day, also in the month of Julius. So there you go. Now, no, there's another connection to make with all that, but I'm gonna leave that one to the end. I kind of wrote down a little bit of things in order here. To try to give it a bit of chronology, so I'm not all over the place like with my usual ADD brain. But so that covers most of that. The religious, politicians, blah blah blah. July 1st and the 4th. Papal bulls, doctrine of discovery, and so that's the modern way that Rome keeps trucking on. So prior to the fall of the Roman Empire, it was still doing the same thing that it did under Catholicism. It was going around and taking over nations that surrounded it and expanding under the standard of the eagle. And, which could be traced back to, say, Assyria even. A lot of the same systems are in place through Assyria to Babylon to Greece to Rome. All the buildings are the same. The money systems are the same. The ideas are the same. The astrotheology is pertinent and in part of it throughout. Whether they change the names of the gods or not based on languages, a lot of the mythology ends up being the same across all that stuff too. And it still always ends up having to do with seasons and sun, So they were already taking things over anyway. And then after they became the Catholics, then they just started doing it under, Christ and expanding, the one world religion, and that there's only one God and Jesus Christ is the savior of everyone. And so that becomes their story. But it's interesting to note that they didn't let anybody read it, like the Dark Ages were all about keeping the people as nothing more than feudal slaves and not teaching them how to read. So they get lied to constantly about what's actually in the Bible, and there's nothing that they can say or do about it up until Martin Luther. Well, prior to Martin Luther, there was Wycliffe and others who'd learned to read, and they read it and they could see the lies. But of course, it was Martin Luther that made a pretty big impact on changing the religion, obviously, with the onset of Protestantism and living by faith rather than by rules and works, which is what the Catholics is, right? So it's almost closer to Judaism, I would actually say, within Catholicism, which is like a mitzvah is a good duty or a good deed done, and that's kind of what Catholicism is sort of revolves around too. Whereas Protestantism is supposed to be more about faith. You accept that you're saved already, and you just kind of live your life and ask for forgiveness as you go through life, and that's more what it's about. Now the Catholics, of course, do that too, but that came about more with the Spanish Inquisition and the onset of confession in the confession booth, which wasn't really a thing before. And obviously that has political means behind it too, right? So who did what? Who can we get dirt on, et cetera, et cetera? Who can we crucify? Who can we burn at the stake? So it's been the same thing. It's still that emanates from Rome right up to the United States today as being the military arm of this mystery Babylon or mystery religion. You've got the eagle standard still carrying olive branches and arrows. So you either come along and take part in the universal thing that we're setting up here, which is what Catholic means, universal, or we'll give you arrows until you come along, right? So it's just up to you. You can either come along peacefully or not. We don't care. And that's still what's going on today, as far as I can see. And I think a lot of people can see that too, but they don't really relate it to the ancient history that goes with it. So that's what I'm talking about now. to work my way up to Canada today and what I think of it and some of the things that are connected to all this stuff that I'm talking about right now. It's all connected. So essentially what they do is they make plebeians of us all, right? So as they took all of the ancient places like the Gauls and the Philistines and Judea and wherever else they took, they made them plebeians, which is Roman citizens, as I said. And now you're going to pay to Caesar what is Caesar's. You're going to be a tax-paying Roman citizen. You're going to be educated in the Roman system. And that's still what goes on today as well, right? We all pay taxes. The church doesn't. Church has money. Church has influence. It gets away with crimes that it never has to pay for. So the true power structure behind the government and the royals that it also set up is still the religious head. That is the number one boss that seems to get away with everything, no matter what they do. So the idea too today, I guess, talked about that the taking of the people that look different than white, is that it's framed as a racist thing, but the reality is it seeks to conquer everyone. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care about race. Like it went and took the Germanians, and then it took, the Irish, it took the Scottish, it took the English, the Anglos, the Philippines, African nations. It spreads all over. It doesn't care what color you are. You're going to be under its wing, and it's going to be part of the universal. So I don't like it when it gets framed as a racist thing, because that turns into all the bullshit that we're dealing with now too. Because the greater truth is it doesn't care what fucking color you are. You're going to be part of the new world order, and that's going to be the way that it is. At least that's what they're working towards for all this time and never stopped. And so like the right to rule comes from them. They assign who the kings are. And it didn't matter that you have all these different kings of different nations with different languages. At the head of all of it was always the papacy, the Vatican, the Holy See, the Vicar of Christ. That's who tells all of them what to do and sets up their wars for them even sometimes. The religious body was also the political body for a long time, up until the Magna Carta. But even after the Magna Carta, it's still a major part of it. Jesuits are behind every new president's inauguration, and apparently they float around in the CIA, and they're in Canada. They're all over the place, right? So that's kind of the real power structure, what it really ties back into. That all nations are connected to it through that. So they go and they set up their kings, and they use them as their new proxy armies, because they had their own military and their own original militaries under the Roman Empire fall. So it's just a facelift with a better story. And then it incorporated Judaism into it. And now part of the mystery religion ends up taking the snake in the Bible, and it correlates perfectly with Prometheus and Zeus, in the sense that the true Lucifer that they worship is the light bearer, the light bringer, the one who brings the light, which is knowledge and intelligence and the ability to see in the future with that Horus's eye shit. Yeah. And that's like the true religion, is the human mind and to be gods ourselves kind of thing. So the serpent in the garden offers from the tree of good and evil, with the promise that you'll become like God. And so that's considered a light bearer, a light bearing moment. So that's why that Satan, or that entity, gets called Lucifer in the Latin language in the Bible. And actually in the King James Version as well, he's called Lucifer. So it means light bearer still across through that. And then you have Zeus and Prometheus. Prometheus stealing the fire from Zeus and giving it back to man. So he's also giving man the gift of knowledge and intelligence. And, well, of course, that turns into technology and making our lives better as well. So that's really what's at the helm of Masonry anyway, is mystery religion is also the mystery sciences, or the mystery schools of the ancient world, right? Like learning about the world around you, like maybe those first light bulbs that they claim were in Egypt, anything medical, the art of preserving and mummifying a body, all of that stuff, the art of watching the stars and knowing them and all those patterns and everything. That's mystery school. That's mystery religion, and that's really what's at the core of all of it, right? And then giving you a mythical entity, something to believe in that you can never really see, but you can believe in, that's perfect, is part of guiding the group with them, as the shepherd, right? And that's something that's prevalent in Egypt, is the shepherd's hook, and also the whip. So you can make up your mind on what the whip's for. I would say it's for chattel as well as cattle. And then the shepherd's hook is not only for the beasts that we took out of the field and put into fences, but it's also for the people as well, right? So the good shepherd is Christ as well, right? To guide the flock in a good way, to help heal your sins and to live your best life that you can, and experience life to its fullest through all your own good and evil even. So like I said, it's not actually all bad. There is good spiritual things contained within this stuff too. But now, I guess that's where we go next, though, is that after crowning all of these different tribes and using them as proxy, that's what ends up turning into doctrine of discovery and discovering the Americas and exploring them all across, up and down, and everywhere else that, they went into Asia, Asia, well, I guess Egypt to some degree, but Africa as a whole, right? So you have colonies all around the world by the most powerful nations in the world out of all of the contenders that were crowned. Smaller ones didn't really get anything, like Denmark was king under the Romans, but it didn't really pan out as well as the English did. It was the English and the French and the Spanish that were the main contenders. And they're the ones who came to the Americas and discovered it. So it didn't matter who actually took what. It's always going to be the mystery religion that was going to benefit the most from all of their proxies. So South America was ultimately obviously given to the Spanish, though, so they had enough, say, risk pieces on the board to utilize to get in there and to start transporting goods and services and mercantilism style shit back and forth from there. The French ended up taking the far north in Canada idea, and the British ended up kind of taking mostly Canada, and then I would say I guess Germany took part in it too, because there's a lot of German immigrants, but German and British and French all kind of really conglomerated in the United States of America. So they had their pieces all across the board, and that's where all this shit sort of comes into now with politicians and democracy and the modern way of things, but it still evolved all out of everything I'm talking about, going back to ancient times, right? The mystery religion. Speaking of the mystery religion, I was looking up Canadian Freemasons the other day, or I pondered across it. Tim Hortons was one, apparently. No real big surprise. As I've said, Canada is already a globalist nation and always has been. And this represents Canadiana. And there's Tim Hortons in the Philippines where they can learn how to work at a Tim Ho's and then become part of the exchange program to come work here in Canada. So you've got the globalist exchange, and it worked out well for the mystery religion, because I said I grew up Catholic a few times. All the people that I was going to church with around my age were just going to leave and never go back. And all the older generation that was taking us all to church, our parents and grandparents, were all just sort of dying or leaving too. So they had to fill those churches back up. So what better of a way to do it than bring the bunch of Filipinos over, give them jobs, help them make more money than what they would make in the Philippines, and you get to fill your churches back up with them, because they're extremely devout Catholics. So, there's some interesting things to think about too, I guess. Where do we come to now? I guess really that's good enough, really to sort of establish, I guess, ourselves into the new world with all of the new leaders and the new nations that were born out of it. So your Independence Day for the United States of America was solidified, and the first president was George Washington, who was a master mason. And then Canada becomes established as a country, no longer British North America, and the first prime minister was Sir John A. Macdonald, and guess what? He's also a Freemason. Now, their actual religions, you have to have God belief to get into Masonry in the first place. So Washington was supposedly an Anglican, which is more or less like a type of Protestantism in a sense, I suppose. Although it was really King Henry VIII's religion that he created so that he could divorce his wives because the Catholics wouldn't let him. But anyway, I digress. And then, John A. Macdonald was a Protestant, apparently. But the one thing that they both had in common was being Masons and worshiping the true God, the light bearer, whether that be in Prometheus or the serpent out of the Bible. It's like I said, it's all the same principle of giving knowledge unto man, and that's kind of what their religion is. So, but that's the thing they have in common. It didn't matter that both of them were parts of religions, especially John A. Macdonald, that was like virulently against Catholicism. They fought and killed each other, throughout the times that Protestantism started. But now you can see it doesn't matter, and they're all kind of pulling the boat for the Catholics in a sense, because it becomes ultimately their land, and their Masonry, in my opinion, is what connects them all to that. That's my opinion, at least anyway, based on what I can observe, right? So yeah, that's kind of the reality of our nations, is that they give you your country as a form of propaganda in a sense, like you're going to believe that you're a Canadian, and they're going to give you a set of values that you're going to be taught from the time you're a kid to believe in, and that'll be your sense of pride and identity. And then the same thing happens in the States, right? So, and really every country that they establish, but at the core, it's still the mystery religion that ends up benefiting from all of this stuff, and everything else is just fluff on top that they can either use for enemies or allies, depending on what the situation calls for. There's a division there. There's many divisions. People talk about, we're more divided than we've ever been. Oh man, people make me crazy. So many people make me crazy. The normals out there who don't really know what's up, just hopeless. They got school damage. They did too good on their tests, and they think that they know it all from their government institutions telling them how to think, essentially. When you graduate high school, even, you put the Mason's board on your head. Your head has been molded by the Mason board. It's not that you put clay on top of that thing. I'd say the clay is sitting underneath of it. The Mason board has molded your mind, and then you go to university and college and continue to engage in that. I think that history is misleading through those studies. But when it comes to the maths and sciences, all that stuff is beneficial, and you can't bullshit it, right? You need it. So that's a good thing, at least anyway. As I've said, there is good things that go along with this stuff too, despite my criticism of it. Oh yes, I'm almost finished here. So I've talked also about the Manitoba Capitol building before being a completely Masonic building.